I went to Spain a few months ago, had a great time, spent 8 nights between Madrid, Sevilla, and Granada, but I want to tell you how much that cost me. I want you to be able to know how to budget your trip out, and I'm going to go through the prices of everything I paid, from flights to accommodations, food, excursions, the whole thing, so that you know how much to expect to pay for a trip to Spain. Make sure you stick around till the end of the video, where I'm going to break down the total price, and then I'll also tell you where I think I could have saved quite a bit of money if I were to do it again. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the flights. Okay, so the flights are going to vary. It's probably going to be the most variable expense that you're going to pay when you're going to Spain. I flew there from Pittsburgh, and to do that I had to fly to Philadelphia and then connect to Madrid, and that cost me $564 a ticket for 2 tickets. So that's a total of $1,120. It's going to depend on where you're leaving from. Pittsburgh is it's a city, but it doesn't fly internationally straight to Spain. So I was going to have to pay just a little bit more. But if you're flying, for example, straight from New York or Chicago or Philadelphia or something like that, you might be able to save quite a bit on plane tickets because you are going to be able to fly direct. However, also know that it really depends on what time of the year you're flying. I went in November, and that's one of the cheaper times to fly to Spain. If you were to look at plane tickets for Spain in something like July, you're going to be paying around $800 from Pittsburgh. I would recommend going in the off season a little bit, maybe in February, March, or April, or later in the fall like October or November. That will really give you a good climate as well as cheaper plane tickets if you're really trying to save a little bit of money. Now let's move on to the accommodations. In Madrid, in my first night there, I stayed right on Plaza Mayor, and this Airbnb cost $160 total for the night. I mean, look at this location, you can't really beat that. So I was willing to splurge a little bit more for a prime location with a prime view, but I'm sure that if you wanted to stay in Madrid, you could go a little bit cheaper, like I did on my final night, which I'll get to in a minute. We went down to Sevilla and we decided to try the hostel experience. And yeah, okay, we did get a private room in a hostel, but we still wanted to see what was going on with the other people that were visiting or whatever. But that being said, we paid 95 euros per night to have a private room in a hostel, and that's a total of 190 euros. Right now, that conversion is about $200 US. The euro and the dollar is pretty close right now as I'm making this video, so we'll just round it out. We'll keep everything in this video in US dollars, and that's going to be about 200 bucks for 2 nights in Sevilla. Then on to Granada. We actually booked 2 separate Airbnbs in Granada. We first booked 2 nights, and those accommodations cost us $185 total for the 2 nights. Then we decided that we wanted to stay in Granada another 2 nights, so we booked a separate Airbnb, and this one cost $155 for 2 nights. The first one was clearly a little bit nicer. It had a much nicer view, and we paid only about 30 bucks more for 2 nights, and I think that was definitely worth it. And if we were to redo this, we probably would have just stayed in that place all 4 nights, but it was not available for the extended stays. Then going back to Madrid for our final night before our flight, we booked it through Airbnb, but it was kind of a hostel / hotel situation. It was a private room. It was very small. We paid $100 for the night. So overall, not too bad. And like I said, if you want to stay in Madrid a little cheaper, there is an option such as this for just 100 bucks. I'm going to leave a link to all of the Airbnbs I stayed at, or for Sevilla, the hostel. I'll leave those all in the description below so that you can check them out if you want to. On to the next part of the budget, which was the most surprisingly expensive part of the trip. These are train tickets to get from city to city. The train tickets for 2 tickets to get from Madrid to Sevilla cost us $220. Then for the transit from Sevilla to Granada, that cost us $172. This is for 2 tickets each, right? And then for our train tickets from Granada back to Madrid cost us a whopping $280. So this is no, cheap part of the trip. This actually turned out to be the most expensive part of the trip besides the flights, okay? And this is definitely something you need to budget for, especially if you want to fly into Madrid and then go somewhere else, like Sevilla or Granada or Cordoba or anywhere like that. you're gonna have to pay quite a bit for the train tickets. You can also debate on renting a car and just driving it down to those cities. This kind of depends on whether you want to just stay in the major cities or if you want to keep driving down to the coastal towns or anything like that. If you're going to stay in the cities, I think you're going to have to pay for parking and all that kind of thing, and it's just going to add up and add a lot of stress. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend renting a car. Also, you have to pay for gas, which is quite expensive over there. So yeah, if you're going to stick to the major cities, I would recommend sticking to the trains, paying that price, because I think it's going to even out in money and stress in the long run. But if you're going to avoid the major cities and you just want to get from Madrid down to the coast, renting a car is a decent option that can save you quite a bit of money. Now let's move on to transit within the cities themselves. For example, getting from the train station to our hostel or train station to our Airbnb, getting into the city center from the major train station. This was actually pretty cheap. I think in the whole trip we spent about 40 euros or $40 on taxis or Ubers. We didn't really take many. The cities were very walkable, especially in the areas we were in. Everything is kind of closed off to cars anyway. You can't really drive your own cars. You can't really get Ubers into these kind of places. So Uber and taxis was not a significant part of our budget. We only had to take a taxi from Granada city center up to the major sunset overlook, and that cost us about $10 as well. And then besides that, we just took taxis to and from the train station when we arrived or were leaving a city. Now let's move on to food. Food was a bit expensive. If you're from the United States, it's probably about the same cost. If you're from a major city in the United States, New York, Chicago, LA, anything like that, that's kind of what prices in Madrid were like. As you move down to Sevilla and then even further to Granada, it's going to get cheaper and cheaper to eat. So I would estimate that for our entire trip, we spent about 60 euros per person per day on food. We kind of went down there to eat. We went down there to try food. We were splurging on stuff. We were getting drinks. We were getting, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're breakfast eaters. So if you're not a breakfast eater, you can cut that down quite a bit. But overall, that's about how much we spent on food. It was a significant portion of the budget, but if you wanted to eat for cheap, you could definitely eat cheaper than that. Now I want to talk about the tours and the excursions that we did. So the first one was our Alhambra tour. For our Alhambra tour, we just did a tour of the outside grounds because we didn't buy tickets in advance to actually go in. So we just toured from the outside, and that was a guided tour that cost 36 euro per person. So total we spent about 72 euro or about 75 to 80 US dollars on our Alhambra tour. Definitely worth the money. I would absolutely recommend that you get that tour, or if you can book far enough in advance, get the tour of the inside of the Alhambra. I heard it's fantastic. We weren't able to see it, but I think it would be great. And that one does cost quite a bit more, I think. I think that one's around 50 to 70 US dollars for that tour. Now note that you could do that whole thing for free. You could visit all the areas we did on that tour for absolutely nothing. We paid for the guide, we paid for the history, paid for the background, kind of like escort us to the stuff that we would want to see that we might have missed otherwise. You can visit everything we did for free, so that is a place you could cut down if you needed to. Next thing that we did was book a flamenco show. We did a flamenco show in Granada in one of these caves. It was one of the most surreal experiences of the entire trip. It is something that I absolutely would not miss. And for this, we spent $60 for 2 tickets. So I think that was well worth it. The show is about an hour and a half, and I really had a fantastic time. Now, if you're going to Madrid or you're going to other Spanish cities, they do have flamenco shows available, but I really recommend doing it in Granada because that is kind of where the origin is, down in the Andalusia region, which is where flamenco originates from. So I would recommend going there. They really do it well, and it's worth that money. The next thing I want to talk about is the Albaicin walking tour. We got this one for free. That being said, we did leave a tip, $10 per person, because our tour guide was absolutely fantastic, and I would really recommend doing this tour if you are in Granada. You don't have to tip. You don't have to, but yeah, we did. We just enjoyed it that much. We thought it was worth it, and we wanted to show our appreciation. Those were the only real excursions that we paid for. In Madrid, we just walked around the city. We didn't do anything extra. In Sevilla, we tried to go into the Royal Alcazar. Tickets were sold out, so we didn't do that, but I'll put up on the screen how much that costs if you wanted to do that. We also tried to enter the cathedral. We didn't do that either. I think it was closed for the day for something. In Granada, we actually went to the Granada Cathedral as well. That did cost a little bit of money. I think about $10 per person. I thought it was worth it. I did enjoy it. It was absolutely enormous. Like, the scale of this cathedral is phenomenal. But yeah, besides that, I think that wraps up everything we really spent significant money on. A couple just side notes for spending. Tipping is not really customary like it is in the United States. You might leave like 1 to 2 euros, but you're not leaving 10 to 20%, right? So tipping is not a big deal. What the price is on the menu is what you're going to be paying, so that makes it really easy as well. Same thing with like taxis, same thing with Uber, same thing with whatever else you might tip for. I don't think it's really expected or customary. Besides that, let's go ahead and total up everything we spent now. So for 2 people, what we spent for our entire trip, including the flights, was $3,750. Without our flights, that comes down to $2,620. If you wanted to do this exact itinerary, but for only 1 person instead of 2, that would come down to a cost of $2,290. Now, the one way I probably would save money if I were to do this again. Like I said, the most surprising expense was the train tickets between the major cities. I could have flown from Pittsburgh straight into Sevilla for about the same price that it cost to fly over to Madrid. That would have saved me on the train ticket from Madrid to Sevilla, as well as had a cheaper ticket for the return journey from Granada to Madrid. It would have been Granada to Sevilla instead, which I think would have been a little bit cheaper. And that probably would have saved me, for 2 people, around probably $300 to $400. So that is an option that you could do as well. Let me know what you have questions on in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this content, and stay tuned for some more travel content on the channel coming soon. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.